Hello, everybody. Welcome to Instrumental Breakthroughs. I am your host, Daniel Shankin. Instrumental Breakthroughs is the psychedelic origin stories of your favorite rock and roll superheroes. It is a project of TAM Integration, which offers psychedelic integration coaching, harm reduction, and educational events virtually to people all across the world. We appreciate you being here, and I'm very excited to introduce my guest. Before we do that, I just want to thank the new Patreons, the new patrons on Patreon. If you want to support the podcast, it's very much appreciated. And you can do that by sharing it far and wide. You can give us reviews on iTunes. You can make comments on the YouTube page, and you can also become a Patreon. Over the past week, we've got quite a few. So I would like to thank Katie, Aaron, Rensky, Cece, and Lori. So thank you all. Um, and yeah, thank you for helping keep the podcast going. Much, much appreciated. I would also like to thank Dead Headland, who's hosting us. They also have a Patreon account. You can support them as well, and they have music going all day long. Brian's done a wonderful job programming since we've all been stuck at home. And I also, of course, want to thank the guys at Livestream Remote who are managing our tech. Um, Super cool. So, with that all said, I would like to introduce Jazz. Jazz was born in Halifax, Nova Scotia. As the daughter of Filipino immigrants, she was surrounded by their creativity and native music. These formative years ingrained in her an irrevocable fascination for music and the arts. As a music multi-instrumentalist, she is able to fuse music from across genres of soul, R&B, devotional mantra, and medicine music, using a variety of instruments ranging from piano, guitar, harp, kalimba, ukulele, charango, harmonium, crystal singing bowls, and gongs. Jazz has created a unique sound that evokes a sacred, timeless ancientness. Welcome.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being here. So, generally, so as you heard, psychedelic origin stories of your favorite rock and roll superheroes. Today, that's you. So, generally, where we start is you sort of tell us one of your instrumental breakthroughs, perhaps a time or two when something really, really meaningful happened to you in a medicine space that inspired your creativity in music. And then we just roll from there.
I have a pretty good story.
You have one?
I do.
Awesome.
Yeah, I've played music my whole life, but getting into the medicine scape, it made me realize that it was more important to me than I even thought it was. And I was in a ceremony, grandmother medicine ceremony of about 80 people outside in the mountains here, and there was this profound moment that came up to me in ceremony when I I got my origin story and where I come from, which is like to know who you are, that's like one of the biggest existential questions, right? Like, who am I? What am I doing here? And in the medicine scape, that's such a beautiful place to find out who you are. So I got this kind of like spiritual grandmother show up, and she had a big conch on her head, showing me up into my visions. And she had this cool she looked like she was straight out of Star Trek, except if her planet was like Atlantis, that's how she was appearing to me, kind of futuristic but ancient at the same time. And she said to me, are you ready to know who you are, where you come from? And she just said to me, you're finally ready at the point in your development to understand that you are from Atlantis, that you're a high priestess that used to sing in the cathedrals in Atlantis. And so from that moment onward, that helped me to understand like I need to really like push forward in what I'm here to do. And that was like a big turning point for me.
So that's amazing. I've got my own Atlantean stories, but this is yours.
Right.
Will you describe Atlantis for us?
What I remember from Atlantis, so I feel like one of the reasons why I'm too scared to surf is because I have PTSD from the flood.
Right.
But what I see of Atlantis is that it is just beaming with crazy technology, but technology that is way more advanced than ours. Like, I think that's maybe where my fascination with crystals comes from, because I feel like there's unharnessed energy that we even, can't even understand. But what I really remember is being in these large cathedrals where it's just like, I feel like they're just all made of crystal.
Right. And so how do you bring through, I can only imagine that the resonance, that the resonation of sound inside a crystal cathedral is pretty impressive.
Exactly.
How does one start to make music that can match that?
It's interesting. So mainly I work with grandmother Aya,
Mhm.
and so a lot of people talk about how whenever they go into their visionary experiences, kind of like a video game, you kind of like, cumulatively work on or keep going beyond from where you have been in your trips. And so for me, I've been connecting a lot with what some people might call aliens, or with star beings, whatever you want to call them. And they have been giving me really interesting tips. Like every time I go into ceremony, I'll get a new download about um how to visualize the way that sound is coming out of my throat, or the way that I'm using sound with instruments to help facilitate healing in people's bodies.
Right. So this is a whole other rabbit hole, right?
Mhm.
Music as a way to facilitate healing in people's bodies.
Mhm.
I love this. Can we go down that rabbit hole for a bit?
Sure. Yeah, I've been doing energy work for over 10 years. Started with Reiki, then went into quantum touch and theta healing, and now it just morphs into whatever comes through. I see things for people, or like in their past lives, or what's happening in their body. So now being in the ceremony scape, it's like such an amazing place for people to be open to receive that kind of healing. And now I'm just like, with the intention that goes in the visioning that I've worked on, I'm more able to like, and it sounds so cheesy when you just say like, when you bring the intention in, right? Because
Hmm.
it's like, but it's so important. Like, what is your intention for every sound that is coming out of your mouth? Like, what is the meaning behind, like, what is your intention? Are you being authentic? And that's like where my guides have been pointing me towards, is being like having more precision with the way that I'm helping to heal.
Right. It's almost interesting. So I often also apologize for being cheesy. Right. And sometimes I wonder, like, why is it that I apologize or like downplay when I'm saying something that has profound healing significance, and yet I'm perfectly comfortable telling a dirty joke. Like, what is that like? And is that some sort of cultural programming designed to sort of keep healing on the back burner? Is that like a cultural trance that um, perpetuates kind of our sickness and low vibration?
Very interesting. I think it is definitely a program, but the more that we are surrounded by people like you, and
No, you.
that is more normalized. But
Mhm.
I think maybe in the place where I live in California, the word intention is kind of cliche,
Right.
because like spirituality is just such a thing here, which is
Right.
awesome.
Right. Right. I mean, I am aware that I am often a parody of myself.
It's a
And
good way to look at it.
yeah, there's kind of no way around it. So so I'm kind of curious, like, I was watching your new video, which came out, which people can see on your YouTube, which will be in the show notes. And you have an Indiegogo coming out, and that will be in the
Mhm,
show notes. What I was really struck with, we were talking about kind of the resonance of a crystal cathedral, is that there was kind of so much going on musically, and yes, yet it was so um, spare. It was basically your voice and a like thumb piano,
mhm.
which has a particular name that escapes me right now. Kalimba?
You betcha.
Kalimba, yeah. And so there was so much, it harkens back to that old saying that music is about the space between the notes. And so I'm kind of curious if you feel like speaking to the importance of the space between the notes.
Hmm. Yeah, that song is very simple but deep, and I think that maybe, I mean, simplicity is what I like when I'm writing,
Mm-hmm.
um, because I feel like the art of listening is something that we're all working on a little more right now,
Mm-hmm.
right? Instead of just like, talking. And so the space between the notes, especially with the kalimba, because it has that resonance factor. The particular one that I have has like a wah wah effect, but
Mm-hmm.
giving space for whatever I have invoked through me to just appear in the listener, for that space to be made, I think is like the most important part for the simplicity
Mm-hmm.
and for like the message of the music to come through without all this distortion, all these different musical moving parts. It's just to like
Mm-hmm.
be nice and focused.
Right. Well, you're making me realize that it was music that taught me how to listen. I mean, it almost sounds ridiculous too, but I think that, it was, well, I believe it was a combination of psychedelics and music that taught me how to listen. Might have been cannabis, um, but I'm well aware now that I was really stuck in my head and that I was just thinking. And mostly I was just thinking about my own desires and anxieties. And then it was a little bit of psychedelics and a little bit of music. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, there's actually a world out there. There's like this music is actually happening, and I can kind of connect with reality and what is outside of my twisted perceptions of it.
Mm, I agree with you. Cannabis definitely was one of the first things that really helped me to understand. And actually, I used to love listening to the Grateful Dead when I was younger.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and just getting into genres like that,
Mm-hmm.
where it's the opposite of what we were just talking about, but because there's like a lot of soloing and a lot of jamming going down,
Mm-hmm.
which also stretches the mind, kind of like, you know, mushrooms or any of these things that we use to have an altered experience. Music can give you the same thing. And especially
Right.
once you have that, like, that's what I love about plant medicines, that it gives you a reference point for that experience in that moment. And then
Mm-hmm.
it's easier for you to draw upon that moment even without the plant medicine after that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know who I was before. There's so many, at some point, it's like, yeah, um, you're drawing on that whether you like it or not. Um,
Right.
Fortunately, we seem to like it.
The flashbacks.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, is it a flashback if it's just your constant state of being?
That's true.
It reminds me of what you were saying, kind of reminds me of sort of the two kind of methods of inducing a trance. You know, we were talking about trance earlier in sort of a not so good way, but you know, the ways of creating an altered states are either through sort of fasting and withdraw and restricting the senses, or the way of sort of over indulging the senses, sort of overwhelming the senses. And that is, and admittedly, like you, I believe you have much more um, experience with ayahuasca than I do. Um, and I'm sort of, and one of the things that I hear a lot, my experiences have actually been surprisingly gentle. Um, but one of the things that I hear a lot is the, sort of the overwhelm and the just the information coming so fast. And so
Mm.
I mean, it seems like you've kind of maybe had the ability to sort of stabilize the experiences in some ways. You know, you've gotten enough facility with your video game character that you're able to sort of navigate consciously in some ways. Is that fair to say? Has that happened?
I think now that I know what my dose is a little better, like with anything, I think you need to know your dose.
Got it. You heard it here
And
first,
for
people. Know your dose.
because I used to be that, girl flopping like a fish on the floor, speaking in tongues, in the ceremony. And actually, the very first ceremony I did was me and my husband's very first date. We went to a ceremony and did
Mhm.
combo. That was really romantic. But now that we've
Did you
done it
compare
to,
buckets? Y-
I was just stoked that I did not poop in my pants. That's on our first
Right.
date.
It's almost like, would you, you know, if you looked in his bucket, because I understand that people can read the symbols, like they can read the various bubbles and vomit and colors. And if you'd be interesting, if you looked in, you're like, "Ah, I don't want to deal with that guy.
You're like, yeah, this guy's got a lot of toxicity. I don't think I'm ready for that.
It's a bit much." But anyway, you were glad you bet there you are glad you didn't poop your pants with your husband. I love this, a love story.
And I think now that we've done over 100 together,
Hmm.
and this is just like, there's certain things that just you gravitate to. And now we're at the point where we're working with indigenous leaders from South America and all kinds of amazing people in our community. I think once you um, gain that sense of trust that the medicine's going to take care of you, it's not going to try to kill you. And, that's like the scariest thing. It's like, am I going to die? Sometimes it's like when it's an ego death and it's a good death that you have to just kind of check yourself. But
Hmm.
mostly, I think finding my footing has just been trusting the medicine, knowing that it's all in the process, and just like, because I've had PTSD where I've just been so just like in another dimension that I just felt very uncomfortable with it, and it might be because of my very first introduction, which was to the organic like bufo,
Hmm.
um, which was like a really intense experience. So from there and working my way back into trusting the process and what's happening as it comes up and just like breathing and relaxing into it and knowing dose and
Hmm.
setting, all those things have helped me. Yeah.
Right. So So I'm processing all of it. It's almost like you gave me a list and I'm trying to repeat the list back. But there was, you know, set and setting, trusting your people, which I guess is part of a good setting, you know, trusting your
Mhm.
leaders and kind of knowing how the medicine works. And also there is this sense of trusting the medicine itself
Mhm.
and
And
almost
then
sort of
letting go
like,
of fear.
letting go of fear and kind of recognizing on one hand, because we were talking about intentionality earlier, and I have this conversation a lot, that there's this sort of fine line between intention and surrender. That we sort of kind of, it reminds me of, like, there was this place when I lived in Philadelphia called Charles Plaza. And one of my friends told me that Charles was an incarnation of Green Tara.
Hmm.
And I sort of believed him. And when you got to know him, you would basically sort of tell him generally what you were in the mood for, and then he would just bring you amazing, delicious, vegetarian Chinese food. And so I sort of feel like it's kind of like that. It's like we go into these things, we're like, I'm sort of think that this is where I'm at. And then it's like, well, okay, here's what you get. Does that seem fair? Would you want to comment on sort of this intention surrender dichotomy?
Yeah, because literally sometimes I go into ceremony, I have all these intentions and questions, and basically those intentions and the questions are dealt with in like the first minute.
Right.
And then the rest of it is like, here we go. There's something that there's things that you want, but sometimes there's just things that you get. And I
Yeah.
guess it comes back to that song, you don't always get what you want.
Mhm.
But 100%, like the medicine knows more what you need than you even need. So
Right. Yeah, I like that thing. It gets handled in the first minute. It's basically like the medicine is like, just say you're sorry. Okay, I'll say I'm sorry. Cool. Aliens.
exactly.
So, what is the role of, um, sort of, so kind of tell me about, if you don't mind, like traditional medicine music. Like you started to work with indigenous leaders and things like that. And, I'm aware that like Icaros are kind of strange and beautiful, and also, various different geographies and different tribes have different musical styles and things of that nature. Do you care to comment on that at all?
Sure. I think my belief around it is that if the elders share with me any of their music, then I would be happy to play it. I know that there's a lot of um, people that are not from a tradition that are singing it, and I think the most important thing is to understand what you're singing about and have a connection to the people or to the language. Because
Mm-hmm.
I do see, like, on YouTube, people are teaching how to sing like some Yawanawa songs, but it doesn't talk about what the meaning of the words are. And I
Mm-hmm.
I sing in lots of different languages, from Sanskrit to Gurmukhi to Spanish, Portuguese, and I think the number one thing that I've learned from any of the people that have taught me medicine songs is that you should just know what you're singing about.
Right.
Because those like portals of sound that are brought by those indigenous people, like that's their lineage. And I'm all about like having integrity and where things come from, and like
Mm-hmm.
having permission to use those things.
Sure. So have you worked with, like, what sort of, I mean, you said the name of a tribe or a language a moment ago.
Yeah, Wanawa. It's a tribe in Brazil, in the
What
Amazon.
part of Brazil?
Um,
Not that anybody
so
knows. I don't even know why I asked.
they're more in Acre, but there's
Mhm.
like so many different within that lineage, that are all along the rivers. I worked a little more with the Huni Queen tribe, which is in the same area, and the the Ashaninkan.
Mhm.
And I'm really excited that I'm going to be including that in the perks of my Indiegogo, that like
Mhm.
you can donate to the indigenous people down there to help them with their infrastructure. Because
Mhm.
I think they need a lot of support right now. But yeah, the Huni Queen and the Ashaninkan are the ones that I work the most with in the indigenous realm. But for what I sing in ceremony, it tends to be like whatever my channels are, or
Mhm.
Spanish and Portuguese that I sing in.
Right. I did get a chance to meet some Huni Kun and listen to their music, and I enjoyed it a lot. Um, it was it was fun. It was danceable. We weren't in ceremony, we weren't in ceremony, but I definitely enjoyed those cats a lot.
Was that in
And
Oakland?
yeah, it was either in Oakland or the city.
Yeah, I think I was at one of them. It was like a psychedelic society
Yes.
function. Yeah, I was there.
Yeah. Yeah, that was super fun. And so you chant in Gurmukhi, and you kind of studied in like the Kundalini yoga lineage for a while.
Mm-hmm.
Do you mind if we go there?
Sure.
So how are you feeling about sort of all of the kind of the scandals and the Yogi Bhajan mess and all of that sort of thing?
Um, I never thought he was the coolest. And I'm not super down with like bowing down to a guru and giving all my power away to somebody else.
Right.
And that is like I think the biggest message. Have since discontinued teaching Kundalini yoga
Mm-hmm.
because I'm focusing more on what is really important to me, which is making music right now.
Right.
But when I first found out, literally Yogi Bhajan came to me in an Aya ceremony. That's where I process everything.
Right.
And he came, and I'm just like, I'm done with you.
What do you want,
Just
bro?
leave us all alone. It's not cool what you did. And it's
Mm-hmm.
not surprising,
It's not
because
surprising.
yeah, because in the Indian culture, like, they're very sexually repressed, especially
Mm-hmm.
from that generation, even into now. And if you come to America and you have all these girls, in their yoga positions, I think that that's a common thing that happens with gurus coming from India,
Mm-hmm.
that like misuse of power.
Misuse of powers, yeah, comes as no surprise. And this is one of the things I got to tell you, that this is one of the things I like about psychedelics, is that it kind of, now I do have teachers and guides that I love dearly, and that I do trust. And at the same time, I really like that the psychedelic space offers me some sort of direct connection, and that also that direct connection um, also seems to come when through music and movement, using my voice, using my body, listening to music. I feel kind of deeply connected. And I sort of feel like it's when people don't feel connected that they are more likely to be taken in by charlatans.
Yeah, and there's people that are just seeking for somebody to show them the way,
Hmm.
like they're a lost lamb. And that's the beauty of psychedelics, is like putting that back into your own hands. They're like cheat codes.
Hmm.
Connecting to the source so that you can just be like, whoop, okay, I'm out of my head, out of my body now. And this is what I really feel at the core of who I am. This is freaking amazing,
Hmm.
right? Just to like strip all those emotions that we just like hamster wheel on so much. That's what I love
Right.
about psychedelics.
So, can I go back to Atlantis?
Sure.
Thank you. Um, because it's interesting, because one person told me one time, it's like, oh, you're here to stop the destruction. She looked at my palm, it's like this old witch looked at my palm and said, oh, yeah, you're here to help stop the destruction of planet Earth from happening a third time. And I was like, a third time? And she was like, yeah, remember Atlantis? And I was like, oh, right, Atlantis and Lemuria. She was like, yeah. And so I'm curious if you have any sense of what went wrong in Atlantis, right? With the flood you mentioned. And what can we do to stop it from happening again? Stopping the destruction of the planet for a third time.
Well, here we are.
Hmm. Yeah, this is as best as I've come up with so far.
That's cool that I just like threw out Atlantis in the first 5 minutes, and you're like, "Yeah, I've been there too." Uh, so that's sweet. We're all remembering. Um, you know, I think my understanding is what we all know is just like, and where we're at right now, is
Hmm.
that um there was a misuse. It's another misuse of power, of us getting these ancient tools of becoming even more technologically advanced, than we could for our own good, um, I think just the misuse of that power was what led us to that greed of wanting more,
Hmm.
so I think for us in this moment, that if we're all waking up to this remembrance of being in an ancient civilization that is waking back up or coming back to the surface, that I mean, we live in 2020. This is a crazy question for you to ask
Hmm. Well,
because
can you
things
think of
are
a more important one?
shifting. A more important one of how to save the world, you mean?
Yeah, yeah,
It's like a more important question than how are we going to save the world?
yeah. We could go to that one instead.
How are we going to do it? Yeah. Um, I think with exactly what you and I are doing is the way that we're showing up to shift things, because there's nothing that we can necessarily do except for do what resonates with us and what's completely like authentic. So you bring you through like that summit, the education, how to use these tools and how to change your life through that. Because one by one, if we're all able to just like break some of that programming, I think that's the number one thing that we have to do. And with
Right.
psychedelics, I think that's the number one way to reprogram and reconnect with that neurogenesis um of like what we actually know already, because there's nobody that's going to tell us what to do that is going to help us to understand how to save the world.
Mm.
People have already been telling us like you got to recycle, you got to use a bamboo straw, you got to get a bidet. But at the heart of it is like, I think that's the number one thing for me that I'm awakening into is like, okay, so I'm from Atlantis and I was a singer in Atlantis. So what does that mean? Like, how do we integrate whatever profound moments are into our everyday life? It's like, well, for me, all that I can do is try to live my dream and like do what I'm supposed to do here. Because if we're all doing what our purpose is or dharma or whatever you believe in, I think that brings us closer to where we're wanting to go rather than the other end, which is,
Hmm.
you know, some of the warfare that exists in this world.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I can't help but think that sacred vibrations have something to do with it.
Mhm.
That bringing forth our creativity, which seems to be an essential part of our nature, well, creation, right? So it's like this world is in a process of creation, and when we participate in it in a sacred way, it's deeply meaningful. And I know that sort of in the psychedelic science community, things like breath work are a big
Mhm.
deal. And I like breath work better than a lot of other things, but I like kirtan better than breath work. I feel like if I'm going to just be constantly moving my breath, I might as well put sacred sounds, you know, sacred names on top of it. And I find that those mantras do more to clean me out than just breath alone, and do more to sort of harmonize my system and kind of raise my vibration so that perhaps I am making more of a difference on the planet in some way.
Yeah, and the cool thing about mantra is just drawing back from being a yoga instructor for the past 7 years is that, I mean, you're reciting an ancient language,
Mhm.
and when you're reciting an ancient language, even the science behind some of the mantras, that the way that your tongue hits the upper palate of the mouth is activating different parts in the brain.
Mhm.
So I can see why, especially when you know that, when you're practicing them, um, it's so powerful. But
Mhm.
breath work, I agree with you. Breath work is really great, but it's like super challenging. I recently just went to Mexico last week and participated in a moon dance, which was it's kind of similar to sun dance, but basically you don't eat for 4 days. You stay up all night
Sounds terrible.
drumming and singing and dancing,
Mhm.
and then sweat lodges twice a day. Sweat lodges are amazing. And just
Mhm.
like, whew, it's cool when you realize that you can strip everything away and have those profound experiences, or you can have that, which was different than just, like the plant medicine
Right.
experience, because it brought me into like these other visionary experiences.
Do you want to tell us about some of those?
Oh my gosh, I've been doing a lot of ancestor, like transgenerational kind of decolonization work, which is
Mhm.
really interesting. And being Filipino, it's like, where do I come from? Because it's a very colonized culture.
Mhm.
But the deeper that I've been going, so one of my last ceremonies, this is really trippy. There's one of my grandmothers has been visiting me in the middle of the night. She'll just wake me up. Ever since I was a kid, I kind of was open to seeing ghosts, or usually it's deceased people that come to ask me for help to transition into the other side. So
Mm.
it's really interesting. My grandmother had been coming to me, and she passed away when my father was very young. While there was like the Second World War in the 40s,
Okay.
in the Philippines, and so she would show up to me in the condition that she had passed away. And I think, in that time in the Philippines, it was like really intense with the kind of invasion of the Japanese soldiers just kind of taking occupation. And so she would show up the way that she passed away, which was like really traumatic for me, because she was like, had kind of a gunshot wound in her head and was just sitting on the side of my bed,
Mhm.
hanging out, which is, you get used to it when you see people on the other side. Um, but it was really cool because I got to connect with her and a lot of my other ancestors. And the ancestral work is like a lot of the work that they do in moon dance and sun dance is like
Mm.
connecting in through the earth. Because with ceremonies, I tend to be like, either I'm going to be talking to some star beings, or I'm going to be talking to my ancestors, and just realizing that, like, yes, there was a traumatic past in the way that my people of like an ancient past used to connect to the earth, and they've
Mhm.
been stripped away from that connection to the earth and Catholicized and put in, pants and clothes and change their language. But really, I think the heart of it is, um, with all this ancestral work, is that I'm here right now. It took generations behind me to bring me to the place where I'm now, of my understanding of what has conspired in my bloodlines, but also what has conspired in my timeline, and then how am I going to bring that into the future? So that is kind of where I'm at right now. Is like it. There's like a mathematics about ancestry, about like, how many ancestors it took to make you, and just thinking about like
All of
it,
them?
all of them.
Sorry to interrupt. Sorry to interrupt your own role.
Just all of them, everything that every ancestor and relative did in their lives to bring you to where you're at right now. And what am I going to do with that, instead of just being a complacent, American that feels sorry for herself, like
Hmm.
switching the script and just living, just living.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think that's where my rant is going to end for now.
Right. So it's, well, what I'm hearing is that all of that sort of inspires a huge amount of like self responsibility, and not a burdened way, but in kind of a joyful way. Like how
Yeah,
do
and
we
a
kind of
really
bring.
inspired.
Mhm. That's wonderful.
100%. Yeah, feeling really stoked, feeling really strong, which is a good
Hmm.
place to be.
Yeah. And I couldn't help but think, I wonder what it would be like to maybe try and Reiki her forehead if she ever comes back.
Well, it's cool because I was working with her in ceremony,
Hmm.
and her and my other grandmother, who they both passed away when my parents were three. And when I first saw them, they'd be in the way that they were left.
Hmm.
And then I was just like chanting and dancing and working through it while I was in plant medicine ceremony. And they just were so overjoyed that I was able to bring them into a non-traumatic place from like where they exited the world.
Hmm.
And then they were just dancing beside me, hanging out, like rocking out. And they transformed into looking like the way that they did before they passed away. And so they were both like in their early 20s when they passed away. So they were younger than me. It was really cool to dance with my grandmothers who were
Hmm.
like 15 years young, 10 years younger than me.
That is amazing.
Yeah. I
Do
mean,
you
it's
have
all
any
happening now.
It's all happening now. Uh, do you have any suggestions for folks who might want to do ancestral healing?
I think the best way is to just talk to your parents or connect with your family members, anyone that is like still alive to help you understand like what their stories are. Because I think storytelling is like one of the best ways to understand where you come from.
Hmm.
But beyond that, I mean, if you don't even know where you come from, I know it's super tricky to like do the whole ancestor checkup through your bloodlines, when you send your blood in or your saliva. But I think the best
I
way
don't
is
want to do that.
no, I know. um, I think the best way to connect in is like through shamanic work, to
Hmm.
be honest with you, like with drumming work, with like Morocco rattles, and just through meditation. And then
Hmm.
they're always with you. If you ask them to appear, then they'll talk to you.
Right. And that's really it's also like very interesting because, your story and what happened in the Philippines is like outside my sphere of education. It's obvious. I mean, you're aware that it doesn't get talked a lot, you know,
Hmm.
amongst white people,
Hmm.
we're super not aware. And, and this is, I guess, why we say things like representation matters, like why it's like really important that new kinds of stories get told, and, new sorts of songs get sung, um, and that, all of our ancestors do get sort of, lifted up, and like you said, it just kind of sounds like, liberated sort of into the light in a lot of ways. And how it's kind of wonderful that, psychedelics and music, and dance, um, liberates, kind of liberates us, and, gives us new possibilities to create consciously, which is kind of what it sounds like, taking responsibility for creating consciously.
Yeah, exactly. And we're in this state of a liberated generation to do all kinds of things that our ancestors couldn't even do because they were just so busy
Hmm.
foraging or hunting or doing whatever they did.
Mm-hmm.
So for you to be able to have your podcast and help people navigate, the deprogramming, and for me to be able to sing and open my heart and just share what I have inside,
Mm-hmm.
and share it, and for us to both share things like in a way that nobody else is doing it, in the way that only we can do it, I think it's just like so powerful.
Indeed. Um, Super inspiring to kind of go deeper into this. I recently moved, and I sort of felt my ancestors in the move. Um, because they were refugees of sorts. They ran, they ran to safety, and that was sort of like leaving California felt a little bit like that in some ways,
Mm.
and is very up for me for quite some time. Um, but again, it's not necessarily about me. Um, and so you're working on a new album.
I am working on a new album, and that's why I'm getting this Indiegogo going.
Mm-hmm.
And that is very helpful because I funded my music video and the recording of that, and just doing that alone, I realized I couldn't really do that times eight by
Right.
myself with my salary. Um, so
You
I
have a job.
am kind of,
Okay.
well,
Yeah, me too. I kind of have a job too.
not a salary job, but
Right. Okay. Well, you said salary,
um,
so I was like, oh man, Jazz has like corporate health care.
um, but yeah, actually, like it was really cool how everything came together for the butterfly song.
Mm-hmm.
Lots of butterflies showing up, and lots of people just like jumping into the mix to make things happen. Like the woman that did my music video, her and her crew just got a video music award for the video that they made for Coldplay, which won Best Rock and Roll Video of 2020 or something like that.
Cool.
Crazy. So, getting her on board to help me do another video, and then I have like a life of songs that need to be recorded. So this is a
Mm-hmm.
long time coming for me. It won't take much for it to come out. It's just getting the funding to do it all and the
Sure.
musicians together, maybe pressing some vinyl, all kinds of exciting
Oh,
things.
will you make it colored?
A colored vinyl. I did see that option. Okay, I can do a rainbow one for you.
Yeah, like even like one of your iridescent wigs that's like kind of light purple through the blue turquoise kind of thing. Like one of those would be great. I've got some
Maybe I
fun
should
colored
make
vinyl.
I'll make that a perk that you can, if you pledge like $1,000 and you get one of my wigs from my music
I don't want a
video.
wig. I just want a wig. I don't. That's kind of not. I just want a wig colored vinyl.
Okay, I'll see what I can
That's
find
a
out
stretch.
there.
What do they call that? A stretch goal, right?
Okay, I we'll see what happens.
Yeah. Yeah, I was a member of that thing where they send a record to your house every month called Vinyl Me Please, and it was often on colored vinyl.
That's cool.
Yeah, sometimes it would just be clear. Sometimes like I got a De La Soul that was like just splattered with colors.
Cool. You're opening up my mind because literally I was just looking into it today to see what the pricing was on it, but I will look into iridescent vinyls.
Mm-hmm. Santi Paro had a like iridescent. You know him?
Mm-mm.
Medicine musician that you should probably know. He's the guy behind Folk Medicine, that
Hmm.
fundraiser for. Yeah, I mean, you'd be perfect for one of the fundraisers. It's to provide medical support for Amazonian people who are hurting from COVID and the like.
Wow.
Um, and he's raised a lot of money, has been very effective, and he's a beautiful soul and a wonderful musician. He lives, I think, in like Palm Springs. I think he lives, east of LA in the desert. And, his record was, one of his album covers was by Louis Tamani. And it was a tangerine. It was like a see-through tangerine vinyl.
Mm.
Because it's sort of like, isn't it nice to have, because the music is available digitally, right? I
Yeah.
could just stream it, right? I could just listen to it on Spotify, or I could have like an altarpiece. I could have
Mm.
like this kind of a thing that's sort of like this sacred object that is kind of like worthy of holding the vibration of the music.
Mm. I love that.
Yeah. It's like the art historian dork in me. That I'm kind of nerding out.
No, I like
Um,
the tangible. I like that idea because like everything is just so invisible right now.
mhm,
But like putting a vinyl on and like looking for that little match to get that one song.
mhm.
Yes, that's a very cool subscription.
Yeah, it was really really nice, and exciting, because also they sort of just send you things. I mean, you can sort of pick if you want, but they'll just send you a thing and be like, "We're pretty sure you're gonna like this. You've never heard of it, but this guy's really good." And yeah, they sent me like a Brazilian soul funk musician from like the 70s who I
Wow,
never would have heard of before, and he's amazing, and and had a song in Sanskrit. Like there
very
was
cool.
like one of the songs was like, just in between like funk, there was like a mantra.
Love that.
Yeah. And so are there any other sort of like exciting guests on the album?
It all remains to be seen. That's a
Mm-hmm.
secret. I'm gonna get everyone on the edge of their seats, wondering what's gonna happen by following me on my Instagram and
Right.
my YouTube channel. um, I'm really excited. Gonna try to get a horn section, maybe some strings.
Nice.
I have a couple ideas. I'm going to be doing all the recording in California. I have a producer here in Santa Cruz area.
Mm-hmm.
So it all remains to be seen. But I do have I just I just released another little video. It's not
Oh,
like
cool.
to this same production value of the butterfly video, but it was just like of me singing another song called Trippin', and that's going to be kind of the next single that I'm going to be working on doing a music video for.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, which is very pertinent to the times of like, why are we tripping out so hard? And how are we going to make this world a better place? Is basically how that song goes.
Right.
Yeah,
Um, Releasing fear, right? We were talking about releasing fear earlier.
exactly.
Um, I recently heard that the word courage comes from the French word coeur. My French
Hmm.
isn't good, which I believe means heart.
Hmm.
So it's like courage means to like do things with your full heart,
Courage.
which I think is rad. Yeah.
You think
Was
of the
that,
lion.
what's that?
You think of the lion from Wizard of Oz, Courage.
Oh, yeah, maybe. Well, that's actually what you met River before the podcast, my 11-month-old, and that's his
No.
costume for Halloween. He's the lion.
Cute.
Yeah, and he's learned to roar. And we put it in him. We put him in the costume all the time just because it's adorable. Um, and he plays a heck of a temple bell. If you need someone
Oh.
to ring a bell on your album, he's available, and I bet you can afford him.
For free. Not there's no child labor here.
No, there's no child labor. Yeah, I'm not really in any hurry to subject him to capitalism.
Exactly. That is a strange thing that people do like to do with their children, so I appreciate that.
Well, he's gotten offers to model. he's gotten modeling gig offers, and they're like, oh, what we'll pay you this, or we'll give you clothes, or what do you want? And we're like, we're not doing that. He's not
Too
he's not
soon.
he's not showing up on social media except maybe from behind every once in a while. We're not doing that thing.
No, I appreciate that because that's a thing when people are going through parenthood, they're showing a million pictures of their kid and their kid has no consent, So
Hmm.
that's pretty cool that you're doing that for your babe.
There are times when I will record videos sort of for my students or something like that, and I'll record them walking because I often think better walking. And you'll get like this much of his head, like right here, bobbing. And sometimes I even feel a little weird about that, but it's also, I feel like he gets to hear Dharma talks. So
Hmm.
I kind of like that he's sort of a little bit steeped in Dharma talks sometimes.
Well, the cool thing about people like you who are like, you know, in their practices or spirituality or whatever, connecting to source,
Hmm.
people that are devoted into their practice that are bringing children into the world in these past few generations. I mean, the children that I see are just so next level and so
Hmm.
tapped in. So,
We're just bummed that we can't take him to see Amma.
this year, you mean?
Yeah, we haven't, because Amma married us,
Oh,
and
cool.
yeah, it was really, really sweet. And we sort of were planning that maybe she was going to give him his first solid food, and she will often have children up there and things like that, and those kids run around and play with each other and kind of grow up around each other, and it kind of remains to be seen what's going to happen with that. It's like
Mm,
we sort of, he can't, not only can he not really be out in the world too much, he also can't be in rarefied sacred spaces, with those
mm,
vibrations, with like some of the best devotional musicians in the world. Speaking, bring it back
mm.
to music, it's like, there's some tabla players there that are just like, what? Those vibes are really, really sweet.
Oh, they're so powerful. And even like just traveling around in India and seeing people traveling with their little ones, going to all the temples. We'll
Hmm.
get back there someday.
Right.
After all this is chilled out.
Yeah, until then, the trees are his temple.
Yeah, exactly. Home. Home life
Hmm.
is pretty cool though. I mean, I'm personally such a homebody that COVID has not phased me too much, but I've also
Hmm.
I have my little quarantine cruise, so
Right.
I've been getting down too.
There is a joke I saw somebody post that says, if you didn't have to change your lifestyle all that much, then you didn't need a pandemic to tell you that humans were dangerous. I was like, I
Oh
relate to this.
my. Yeah, it's just such a spectrum of feelings out there that I just feel so glad that you're doing great, that your family's doing good, that I'm doing great. I mean, this is one thing that has been really lacking and, kind of sad is that the medicine isn't around as much in
Hmm.
like, the Amazonian elders aren't coming up, which is totally respectable.
Hmm.
But for the ceremonies that I have been to, people are really needing it right now. So
Right.
it's good that you're doing all this virtual stuff to help because we all need the help.
Yeah, trying to. Um, yeah, it sort of changes our perspective of like the global village. Like everything, like all over the world was so readily available. Now it's like a trick to get to the grocery store. I got halfway to the
Right?
post office today before I was like, oh man, no mask.
Oh, you had no mask, so you could not get any groceries.
Well, I was going to the post office actually, but I had a scarf, so I just like just prayer shawl. I just prayer shawled it up. Nobody gave me a hard time.
So many pros and cons, like all the virtual stuff that's happening is
Hmm.
so cool. I think it's so amazing how people are just connecting from all different parts of the world.
Hmm.
But it's going to be pretty amazing when we can all come back together again.
Indeed.
Yeah. But you're
So
just really setting up the stage for like getting all these international people interested in what you're doing and then coming they'll come to your events in the future one day, you know.
it it is kind of nice to be able to have people from all over the world kind of gather and to hear from people who are like, oh yeah, I'm in Africa. Oh yeah, I'm just like, oh, I'm missing some of your talks because I'm in like Hong Kong.
Hmm.
It's like, oh, I guess we gotta add different events at different times
Oh
for the
yeah, that's
Hong Kong
right.
contingent.
That's cool. I didn't
Well,
know they like to get down like that.
it was interesting because, this person, was interested in, and I think they were a therapist and they were living in China somewhere or Hong Kong. And they had reached out and I was like, well, do you want to talk? Like, do you know anybody who's like into psilocybin in China? And she was like, no. And I was like, oh, because they're watching, like you don't want to get
Yeah,
in trouble.
they're watching.
Uh, I really want to get to Mongolia because I'm pretty sure there are like Amanita shamans. Like I feel like there's shamanism, there's psychedelic shamanism in Mongolia that doesn't get explored enough. Thoughts? Are you aware of this? Do you know anybody?
Reindeer pee?
Yeah, do you know any reindeer pea shamans?
I haven't thought about it, but maybe that's how they do the throat stinging. Like maybe that's how
Mm,
they can go there. I've been working on it only in the shower and my car by myself.
right. I mean, I do long for the day. I'm holding out hope that one day you will be able to get reindeer pea in Whole Foods. Amanita reindeer pea.
In a bulletproof coffee.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Bulletproof reindeer pea. And I wonder if there's a Mongolian word for it, for that particular conveyance of medicine.
Well, maybe you're the guy.
To find
You're the
out.
guy that's gonna bring it. You just have to go to
It's,
Mongolia and check it out.
I mean, yeah, I mean, I'll go. I do not want to own a beverage company
True.
of any sort, you know. But I do want to hang out with those guys. So if you're listening and you want to fund a trip to Mongolia to go find out, like we can negotiate. Um,
So if any of your Patreon members have heard, he's starting a new campaign.
for an Indiegogo to yeah, the Indiegogo. So last thoughts, like, is there anything that you really want to convey to people that you want people to know that's important to you to channel through in this moment?
Um, I think the main thing is just live your dream. You
Mm,
know, it's so again so cheesy, but I think that's my biggest lesson right now is that the most power that I can and effectiveness that I can have in showing up in this world is doing what means the most to me and doing what I truly love, which is music. That's the number
mhm.
one thing that just exudes through me and the way I talk and the way that I live my life. That's the number one. Yeah.
Fantastic.
And being in community. Community is like the number two thing that has just been really prevalent.
Right.
100%. Yeah.
Well, thanks for being part of my virtual community.
Thank you for having me here, Daniel.
Yeah, this was a blast.
Yeah,
Do you
this is
want
perfect timing. All my doggies are starting to wake up and want my attention now. So
right? And then one more, like how people find you.
So if you want to find me, I am on Instagram, Jazz Lamar. You can see right at the bottom of my screen here how it's spelled. So if you look for me there on Instagram, Facebook, I have a YouTube channel, I have a SoundCloud account, I have my music streamable on all the platforms. So I'm
Mhm.
out there, and my Indiegogo campaign is getting launched in the next few days. So stay tuned so that you can help support me to get more music out there into the world.
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks to Jazz. Thanks to Deadhead Land and to Livestream Remote. I continue to be Daniel of Tam Integration, and we love you guys and appreciate everything that you do and are excited for you to live your dreams. And let us know. Let us know how you're living your dreams. All the best. Peace and blessings.
Bye, everyone.